Transport Minister has indicated that he would like to see more cargo on trains, but the number of commuters using passenger rail has also declined. PRASA has underspent consistently on capital projects for 6 years, reaching a low of 24% of budget in 2020. However, the minister is confident that the new management can turn this around. To talk to us about the state of PRASA, I'm joined by the entity spokesperson, Andiswa Makanda. Andiswa, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, as I've said, PRASA has underspent consistently on capital projects for 6 years, with severe underspending on capital projects since 2019. Why was this the case?
Good afternoon, Katlego. Good afternoon to your viewers. I think, and that's the important part, is that since 2019, you will remember that by 2019-2020, that's when there was COVID-19 and lockdown, and so it was kind of difficult to do any capital projects because of COVID-19 and the lockdown. And part of the problem also is the issues around our own procurement policies, which also created stumbling blocks in spending on capital projects. So one, we had the COVID-19 and lockdown. People are getting sick. There were travel restrictions, so it was difficult to even get the parts that you need to recover the rail network, or even to spend on any of the capital projects. Then you have our procurement policies that are a stumbling block, capacity issues in supply chain management. And thirdly, the issue that was also said by our Group CEO when he was presenting at the Standing Committee of Appropriations, the issue of leadership instability. So these are the three things, these are the two things that we are trying to fix as an entity so that we can spend on capital projects. So we are working on all these issues to mitigate these challenges and to ensure that we spend on our capital projects.
Of course, the issue of COVID-19 is now out the way, but with regards to your procurement policies and the leadership instability, what measures are currently being put in place in order to see PRASA moving forward?
Definitely. I think what's very important for us is to ensure that we amend our procurement policies so that they're in line with the PFMA. Also important for us is to capacitate our supply chain management, to bring in the requisite skills to ensure that we award the right contracts. I think part of the problem is that a lot of our tenders that go out to the market, they come back as a non-award, and we found that a big issue is the skills requisite. And so we are capacitating at the skills level. What we're also doing is that we're getting technical advisors to come and assist us, because what we are dealing with now is the rebuilding of the rail network, which hasn't been done since the 19th century when we started building the rail network. In terms of the leadership stability, the board currently is finalizing the selection process to find a permanent group CEO to steer the ship in the right direction. We're also filling in a lot of critical vacant positions that will assist us in implementing the work that we need to be doing.
Now, you are making strides. I mean, in the first quarter of 2022-23, PRASA had a 1.6 billion rand budget, with spending at 1.7 billion rands, exceeding the budget by 2%. What was that spending on?
Remember, with the COVID-19 and the lockdown, we experienced a lot of theft and vandalism of the rail network. And so a lot of our corridors were distracted and vandalized. And so because we're trying to recover as many corridors as possible in this financial year, this is part of the reason why we exceeded the budget allocation and the projections. And so we've got a 10 corridor priority project where we're trying to recover in this financial year 10 corridors, and we are right on track. We have recovered several corridors in Gauteng, including Mabopane and Salisbury. In the Western Cape, we've recovered parts of the central line. We've recovered the southern line and the northern line. In KwaZulu-Natal, we are also working on the KwaMashu line and the Umlazi line. And so that's part of the thing, because we accelerated and ramped up the projects to recover those the corridors that were devastated by theft and vandalism.
You make mention of the central line in the Western Cape. Now, rail infrastructure projects on that line were suspended in September after disruptions due to violence and intimidation. What measures are you putting in place to thwart costly economic sabotage?
I think what is critical for us is that we work with law enforcement agencies. Right now, speaking on the central line, after the threats of violence that happened on the central line a few weeks ago, what we've done is we've devised a new security plan, an integrated security plan where we'll be working with the law enforcement agencies and SAPS. That plan is also subject to approval, where we want to deploy more security. But over and above that, we are working also with other state entities, such as Telkom, Transnet, and City Power and the likes, who are also experiencing theft and vandalism. We've come together to create a forum where we can come together as a joint force to work on turning the tide against theft and vandalism of the rail infrastructure, economic sabotage that is. Also, we are also banking on the NPA to help us in terms of prosecution, so that people don't think that they can sabotage economic infrastructure unabated. So those are the integrated security measures that we are putting in place to make sure that we are turning the tide against economic sabotage. Also importantly, with our integrated security plan, where we have implemented that plan, such as the Pretoria to Mabopane line, we haven't had any incidences of theft and vandalism. However, there have been attempts, but because of that integrated security plan, we've been able to prevent any theft and vandalism.
All right, and lastly, you make mention of the progress that you've made in the 10 corridors in looking at requisite skills that are needed when putting together the work and also rebuilding the rail network. What lies ahead in ensuring the country's railway system is now operating optimally?
No, that's great. We are working very hard to recover the 10 corridors. Remember that we're talking about more than 1,000 kilometers of rail network and signaling that was vandalized or stolen. And so to fix it at one go is not practical at all. It's impractical, which is why we came up with the 10 corridor priority plan, where in this year we're going to focus on 10 corridors, and the following year we'll add more corridors. Currently, we have 15 corridors that are operating against 40 corridors. By the end of the year, we'll have more than 50% of the corridors operating, which should be good news to cash-strapped consumers who are relying on a cost-efficient rail network. You've seen the rise of fuel costs. So part of it is that we need to make sure that by the end of this year, we've recovered all the 10 corridors. We're making progress. Next week, we'll be running the Sport to Pretoria line, which covers Mamelodi and Loftus area. So this is a great progress for us. We've also in the long distance rail sector, we've recovered the Johannesburg to Eastern Cape line. We've also recovered the Johannesburg to Musina. With the Makufa coming up, the Makufa Jazz Festival, we're also taking a train there, an events train that's going to help us also with the revenue generation, because PRASA hasn't been able to generate revenues ever since the shutdown of the corridors and affecting our operational budget. So with the events train that's going to go down from Makufa, we're hoping to generate some revenue. So there's a lot that's happening that people can look forward to. Central line, people thought that we will not be able to get any trains running because of the illegal occupations of that network. But through an intervention and our operation began, we were able to get the communities to assist us in order to run the train from Cape Town to Langa. What we're looking forward to is to extend Central Line to reach parts of Khayelitsha and Chris Hani area. So there's lots of that happening. It's not as fast as people would like. It's because there's a lot of work that needs to go into it. We don't want to create a demand surge on the market. We want to make sure that we do quality work, recovering those lines.
Right. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Thank you, though, for your time. Andiswa Makanda, who is the spokesperson for PRASA, speaking to us about the turnaround strategies for PRASA.